My husband is always on lookout for free pieces for me, and this one was his find. It was listed for free, the picture was pretty blurry, and we drove about 40 minutes hoping that there will be a beautiful, partially painted walnut dresser. Well, it was definitely partially painted. The wood grain you can see on the drawer fronts, it is fake. It's printed for wood grain. But we don't look a gift horse in the mouth, right? The drawer fronts were solid, and my plan was to sand them down and see what kind of wood was underneath this fake printed wood grain. Hi, everybody, welcome to another makeover. I'm repainting the dresser. I needed to scuff sand it first. I used 180 grit sandpaper, and I didn't really mean to sand down this glossy black paint. It just happened. And did I also sand through the original finish of the dresser? Of course I did. I exposed some pressboard here and there, which was not really good, and I will have to deal with this later. I wish it had gone that easy with the drawers, I mean sanding the old finish. Here I had to actually go down to 120 grit sandpaper to be able to sand the old finish and printed wood grain. It turned out that there was white birch underneath, and I immediately came up with a plan for the dresser. I was going to paint the body in a light olive green, a color I had used in one of my previous makeovers, and I really liked it. I also wanted to do a paint wash on the drawer fronts to keep them in a lighter tone. That was the plan until I started sanding the drawer pulls. And they turned out to be walnut. Usually, when I work with dressers like this, the ones with a printed imitation of walnut wood grain, if there are any actual wooden parts, they're often made of birch and toned with a dark tinted lacquer to make them look like walnut. So I didn't expect to see a real walnut here. And that changed my plan. I still wanted to paint the body of the dresser in that olive green color, but now I wanted to make those white birch drawer fronts to look like walnut, at least to try. As you may notice, I had covered the holes on the middle drawers before sanding them because I'm changing the hardware, but there were still some small gaps between the plugs and the edges of the old hardware holes. To fill them in, I used tinted CA glue, and I bought it a while ago. It was sitting in the cabinet, and I think that was the last time I used it. It was pretty thick, but it worked, and I sprayed it with activator to speed up the drying. I sanded off the excess CA glue, and now comes the fun part. I'm doing the brushing technique. I already showed it in one of my previous makeovers. It's pretty easy and straightforward. I use a wire brush attachment for my drill. I think I bought it from Home Depot. I only have this one and it works well for me. The wire brush removes the softer wood fibers and creates kind of like a 3D effect on the surface. And if you're wondering why I didn't just stain the drawer fronts walnut, well, I did on one drawer front and it didn't really look great. I let the gel stain dry overnight and then I applied different shades of water-based wood stain. I was trying to imitate the natural variation of walnut tones, the different shades of brown that walnut usually has. And as a reference for the color, I used one of the drawer pulls. I wiped it with some mineral spirit, and that gave me an idea of what it would look like once I applied the top coat. The only thing I didn't think about was that mineral spirit can soak in really deep and darken the color a lot more than a water-based top coat. So I tinted the drawers slightly darker than I was supposed to. Remember how I said that I had to deal with the spots where I sanded through the alt finish down to the particle board? Normally, I would apply a coat of clear shellac before priming, but then I remembered that the primer that I have is actually a special kind. It's designed to smooth out the areas where the old finish has chipped or flaked off. So instead of stripping the whole piece, you can just remove the loose paint and use this primer to even out the surface. I figured that if it can handle that, it might also help with blending different surface textures. And it did. Maybe it's because I didn't sand the particle board down to the stage when it's grainy and soft, but once the primer dried, I gave it a light sanding and the top turned out perfectly smooth and even. Once I applied the first coat of paint, I noticed a little scratch I didn't manage to sand out. Tiny scratches like that are almost impossible to fill with regular wood filler, but recently I figured out that wood grain filler works perfectly for that. As a top coat for the drawer fronts, I'm using acrylic polyurethane. The brand is called Beauty Tone, and I believe it's Canadian brand. It's sold at Home Hardware, and I really like it. While I was applying the top coat, I started second guessing my choice of paint color. I had done some samples. I took a piece of dark walnut plywood and I painted a swatch, and the colors looked great together on a small samples. But once I put stained drawers into the dresser, I didn't like the combination. And there we go, I decided to change the color. I think this rich green color works better with dark drawers. All of the drawer boxes were a bit wobbly. I think they've been like that since they were built because there was nothing actually loose, no missing screws or nails. I meant to address this problem earlier before I stained the drawers, but I just forgot. Probably I was so excited to use my wire brush, so not even wobbly drawers could stop me. Normally I would use brad nails, but I was just too lazy to uncover my compressor and find the nail gun, and I didn't have shorter nails, so I had to go and buy them. That's why I decided to go with just the regular nails. The first coat of poly on the drawer fronts had dried, so I gave it a light sanding, and before applying the next coat, I attached the drawer pulls. It's just easier for me to finish them while they're already in place. Once the pulls were on, I applied two more coats of polyurethane. Here is the new hardware I'm using, and please don't mind those giant washers. I was planning to use them at first to cover the old hardware holes, but then I changed my mind. The last step is to attach the legs. Off camera, I applied a couple of coats of polyurethane to them, and we are done here. Let me remind you how this dresser looked before, and this is the after. Enjoy the final result. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in my next video.